Hey guys, welcome back to another Architecture Real Talk. So today's topic is quite interesting. Is architecture boring? Is today's architecture mundane, repetitive? Is it just driven by production? Are we as architects now coming to a standstill? Is our profession on a decline? Do we lack creativity? Is there something that we did to our profession where we no longer can explore ideas? And what are the consequences? So one of the things I want to reflect at is there a difference in quality of today's architect versus the architect of the time of, let's say, Le Corbusier, or even further back when we look at Frank Lloyd Wright, or up into the 1900s? And the simple answer is there is a difference in quality subjectively, even though we're a subjective field. You can argue how basketball evolved, how sports evolved, that the sports now is more competitive than when it was in the past. Even though the players of the past might be great or greater, they do not have a comparison to today's players. They have more in their arsenal. Likewise, if you were to look at art, if you were to compare Rembrandt, Van Gogh, if you were to be looking at classical Leonardo da Vinci or even the Mona Lisa, and you compare it side by side with pouring paint from a paint bucket or resin cast or a broom that is dipped into different colors and then just smeared across the canvas. There's a stark difference between that as art versus the technique that was deployed at the time of classical art or Hellenistic period of art. So there is a subjective difference all across that can be measured. So the quality of architecture nowadays overall has declined. Now, I'm not saying that there is not good architects out there. There's not star architects out there. This is not to say that I'm saying Zaha Hadid is not great, or UN Studio is not producing great work, or Bjarke is not producing great work. There are architects that are producing marvelous architecture, but they're 1% of what architects are in the real world. What I'm trying to talk about is the architects that practice architecture throughout their daily life. And at the same time, they do not have the opportunity to produce great work. So I've narrowed it down to these 5 factors, and let's go ahead and start looking at that. So one of the things that I have noticed is homogeneity. That something that has happened in architecture, that we go for shock value. We go for the instant gratification. A lot of architecture nowadays is pretty much a copy or a version of an architecture that has already been done. It could be blamed on technology because it's easier to copy in CAD, easier to copy an entire family in Revit, and you can easily bring a portion of the project in from your previous work. Or it could be argued that people are being lazy. And I don't think that's actually the issue. The issue is we're not innovating of what we prior had. Up until 1960s, 70s, 80s, when people were drawing by hand, it forced them to be innovative because there's no reason for you to copy something word for word if it's being drawn by hand. The ability of your hand to just make a slightly different gesture and create an entirely different building was easier than to actually copy paste an entire detailed section of a document set and then try to push it through the city. So there is a sense of homogeneity. Another thing I have noticed is because of the shock value we are looking at Japan, we're looking at architecture that's coming out of Denmark, all simultaneously. If you go on Arc Daily right now, you will see multiple buildings being posted from different parts of the world. You can take a virtual tour through this building. You can wear your 3D glasses and you can walk through the building. The idea that you can actually have a full understanding of the building without even looking at plan, section, elevation, allows you to copy a building in a way that all of it is solved. There's no need for interpolations at this point, looking at plans, doing case studies on building, and you don't have the means to push further. And I'll explain that as we go further into it. So we have the sense of trying to have homogeneity, which has overall led to a decline in quality because we're copying architecture rather than pushing the boundaries to the next level. Now, the second thing that I fear has happened is that we have overemphasized functionality. Architecture as a field has developed with more and more amenities to be taken care of. In the past, we were primarily responsible for structure and architecture being taken care of. Now we have MEPs, mechanical, electrical, plumbings. We also have fire safety. We have Wi-Fi communications. We have smart home technology. We have all of these various things that get tied together, even down to an extra conduit for solar panels on the roof. This is just at a residential level. At a commercial level, you have security system, you have RFIDs, you have all of these doors that are linked together. There's various different components that are happening in the hospitals that have far more complication to the existing building. We have a far more complex infrastructure now in a building. Just like a microchip developing, a building itself is now more smarter than what we had in the past, and which makes it less flexible. We have less room for innovation because there's specific buildings that require specific rooms, that require specific doors, that require specific windows. Lack of choice is one of the things that actually kills design. So the overall push in standardization has moved creativity out of design, which has also forced us to actually rely on prior projects for details and windows and door schedules that we can just simply pull from another project. Plus, they're already there. So that's functionality, right? So the third thing that I could think of that suppresses all of this is regulatory constraints. We are looking at having restrictions placed on by the city. So the city itself actually mandates that you have specific amount of water conservation. You have a specific amount of waste requirements. You have a specific driveway, and the codes have been getting bigger and bigger. If you were to just look at the fact that you have a specific amount of cubic feet of water to be held on site, and that has been increasing. The more you look at it, the further we have to make a further efficient design. The clients are looking for the same thing. If you can deliver in 6 months, you're not good enough as the person who delivers in 4 months, 3 months, 2 months, 1 month. If you can have it by tomorrow, generated by AI, whatever it needs to be, if I can put a pretty picture in front of a client, I get that client first. So in that sense, we are overemphasizing the fact that it needs to be going towards permits. It needs to have pretty much the government needs to oversee it to a point. I remember at the time in 1990s that you can actually walk in with napkin plans, a set of 6-7 sheets for a whole house in the city of Houston, and you can have that house be permitted the very same day, stamped, and you're ready to go back out on site and start building. But now, not only do you have like a full construction set, you have set that is coordinated, but you still come back with comments. And the longer you spend in that time providing RFIs, providing different revisions, slipping sheets, the less time you have when it comes to constructability, and the lack of professionalism is shown to the client. The client sees you by deliverables. He doesn't see you by actual beautiful architecture. So the clients themselves are hindered by economic circumstances. If you look at 2008, where we had the housing crisis, right? Then 2012, we started looking at Baker Hughes merger. 2015, we had another setback with oil surplus and not enough oil, and then it hit Houston hard. 2019, COVID-19 happened. The whole city went to a shutdown. With all of these economic turmoils, the clients have a lack of budget. They have a lack of flexibility when it comes to creative work. They're gonna ask you to design exactly what is required. Any level of freedom to them is money. So because of that, the clients shy away from architecture that will actually be creative. It doesn't give you time to innovate. Architects don't have time to be creative because any feature that we come up with is an additive. Something to this day that I do not understand is the concept of value engineering. Why would I design something only to be taken out because it doesn't meet budget? Why can't the budget be self-explained very, very beginning? Like, this is the exact number that we're looking for. Do not exceed this. When I'm giving you exactly what you need and somehow the market prices change, there's some level of fluctuation, and we VE out design first, functionality second. So because of all of those notions, architecture always takes a back end of the stick. We always get pushed back. Another thing that has happened, and this gives me to the fifth point, is that we have a sense of timeless architecture. What we have done recently in architectural trends is we have gone from modernity. We went from classical, where we got rid of all of the ornaments. Then we got to a modern era where we went into minimalism. Then there was a anti-modernism, like a deconstructivism that came about, and people started making zeitgeist movement where they were just objects being dropped. Frank Gehry, Daniel Libeskind dropped building that had no understanding of sight, lack of sight understanding, lack of building concept understanding, and then we dropped these buildings on site. Then it went back to the trend of let's go even more minimalistic. Let's do polished concrete floors. Let's make white walls. And that's where we are at a standstill. A lot of the architects are stuck there because the trends themselves have gotten minimalist to the point where there is no way you could subtract anything further, or you'll be getting rid of walls at this point. To give you an example, so let's say Frank Lloyd Wright, when he designed a house, he wrote a very poetic statement. He said the fireplace is the heart of a house, that everything should surround it. So even the primary bedroom is secondary to when it comes to kitchen, dining, and living. And the kitchen itself is the served area as well as the living room, but they're two different served areas, so they were divided by a wall. And then itself, the kitchen is a preparation area. It was at first a part of service, then it became a part of serve, then it got merged with the living room. And in that process, there was some sense of community, some sense of concept where the house gravitated towards the center, right? Now, as we move closer to modernism, what you find is all of these spaces merge into what's called a grand room or an open space plan. Now we have this massive open space plan. Now, what do we do further now? We have isolated primary bedrooms from the secondary bedroom. We gain privacy. What's next? See, there's a lack of understanding of what classical architecture is. There's a group of architects that are coming out that have a full understanding of how to use technology, but they have no idea what architectural movement took place. They're not able to reflect on the past to create something new. They're not able to push the boundaries because there's a lack of sense of not having urgencies to understand architectural history. There's a lack of understanding when it comes to how buildings get put together. There's a lack of understanding when it comes to detailing. So a lot of the things what's going on in architecture is they're being a hodgepodge mess and they're being pushed together faster and faster. So what ends up happening is you dish out buildings that are not even designed by architects because there's a lack of creativity already there. But you go to a guy that can promise you a permit. And since he's giving you exactly what architects are giving you, you're not able to differentiate why should I hire an architect versus someone like KB Home versus someone like that's just a production developer. And what ends up happening is you'll get this design build contractor that can give you both, and you have an architect that has skill set to design something, but his lack of utilization of it leads you to understand that there's no way that you'll be paying more for a service that is equivalent to a contractor, to a design build. So you end up getting the same results from both. I hope I'm making a little bit more sense. The sense of urgency to be timeless has actually backtracked us into a constant stillness. Architecture has failed to evolve in the last 20 years, in the last 10 years. We have gotten to a point where we're no longer pushing the boundaries. We're no longer being innovative. Now, you can look at works like Zaha Hadid, Santiago Calatrava. You can look at UN Studio, as I mentioned, Bjarke Ingels, these type of architects that push the boundaries, use the technology to their absolute maximum capacity. Or you can see majority of the architects falling under the same umbrella of copying and creating cookie cutter homes. Now the choice is yours. How should architecture proceed is really up to the client, the flexibility they give us, and the ability for them to communicate the ideas across and for us to deliver on their promises. So with that said, I'm sorry to leave you guys on a bad note again. I told you this is a complex topic, but these are the 5 reasons I really believe that if we hone in on it as architects, as clients, as future architects, We can address the issue of the failure of architecture when it comes to being so boring. We have become nothing more than just the art that was just thrown on there with random strokes. With that said, until next time. Follow for more content.